Hello and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. So, this week we're going to take a look at Timothy Pool, the little Poolie man. I don't know why I called him that. Tim Pool, or Dim Tool, as people often call him. Now, Tim Pool owns and operates the largest news sort of political thing channel on YouTube, and that is weird because he is a very, very odd kind of person, and his show is absolutely batshit insane. And to the extent where it's almost difficult to title videos about him, so we'll see what it turns out to at the end, because it just veers all over the place like some kind of rambling schizophrenic gibberish. I don't know what. So let's jump in and see what he's got to say, shall we?
How about we do this? U.S. job openings surpassed 10.9 million. Dang. The number of open jobs in America is greater than the number of unemployed people, and that's 2 months in a row now. Now, last month they filled close to 1 million jobs, but had 10.1 million openings. That was a record. And that meant there were more openings than people available to work. From April to July, we lost 3 million jobs per month, about just shy of 3 million, but only gained about a couple 100,000 per month. So it was like for every 3 jobs lost, 1 job has been gained.
So, what's going on here? Well, there's a couple of things. The first one is a lack of immigrants coming in, because most countries in the Western world rely on a steady influx of immigration in order to fill certain positions. But also what's happening is that people are getting checks from the government, so they don't have to work, which, to be honest, strikes me kind of as something, kind of seems like a good thing. I don't really understand why this is bad. It seems to me that the situation should be that the workers are needed more than the jobs are needed, you know? That to me seems like a sort of better balance of power. You know, it's one reason why I heavily support the idea of UBI, specifically because I want to create a situation where the employers need the employees more than the employees need the jobs. I want to take that economic gun away from people's heads, so they're free to choose jobs which they would like, and therefore they'll have to increase the benefits of having that job if they want to entice people to fill that position. That seems pretty reasonable to me. What it means is that in a sort of supply and demand system, in a truly free market, if it was under these circumstances, it would just mean that the value of people's labour has gone up, in which case the corporation should be paying more for it, right? And fundamentally, if you have a business that you can't afford to pay people enough to entice them to fulfill those roles, then that's just this kind of weird vanity project that you've got, and you're sort of asking other people to sacrifice their lives to fulfill your selfish dreams of being a CEO. Close the company. Who gives a shit? Scale it down until it runs out of profit. I mean, it's kind of crazy that as a socialist here, I'm the one who's arguing for the mechanics of capitalism, but you'll notice that a lot about these sort of proponents of capitalism, they go on about talking how capitalism is great and can provide X, Y, and Z, but when it actually may provide some of those things they promise, they really don't like it. You know, they're about, oh, capitalism provides people with freedom. Well, here's some freedom for people. And they're like, oh dear, we don't like that. That'll cause the collapse of the entire system. Because the truth is, it's not really capitalism that they like. It's the outcome of capitalism that they like. They like capitalism specifically for the same reasons that we don't.
You know, so I think ultimately what this brings us to is we're watching the country collapse. It's breaking apart.
Well, surprise, surprise. Regardless of what's happening, Tim Pool's answer, his prediction is that we're watching the country fall apart. America is about to descend into civil war. Man, he is so terminally online. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'm pretty terminally online, but Jesus Christ. The only people who are interested in actually, like, taking up arms against the Democratic government are people so stupid that they couldn't organise a piss-up in a brewery. We saw what they did in the insurrection, you know? They're idiots. like flipping children. Like children who'd occupied a classroom that they weren't supposed to be in, and the teacher's like, "Oh, get out of there," and they're like, "Hey, we're inside." You know, that's the level of forethought, pre-planning. They just got in there, they didn't know what the hell they're doing, and they just stood around taking selfies, posing with guns, and then just basically quietly left, and then were surprised to be arrested. They already tried it. It's not. I don't think it's going to happen to him. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe, you know, maybe just this one time in all of your vast number of predictions that have been wildly wrong. I mean, this guy is a guy who predicted a 50 state a 50-state landslide Trump victory in the last election, and obviously he couldn't have been more wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about, but let's say, you know, it's possible, I suppose, but I find it unfathomably unlikely, and some sort of, you know, economic imbalance between the number of jobs available and the people who want jobs. That's not usually how, like, revolutions happen. Usually revolutions happen the other way, when there aren't enough jobs, not when there is so many that employers are going to have to be forced to put their wages up. That doesn't usually sow sort of public unrest.
Portland announces they're banning trade with Texas. California says no travel to the other states. I'm like, yo, at this point, this is one by one the bricks falling out of the building as the United States is crumbling down. And so long, I think the main issue is you've got people on the left who actively want that to happen. The Occupy Wall Street people, for instance, were like very much so wanting the U.S. to collapse. Antifa very clearly wants the U.S. to collapse.
What are you talking about, dude? That's only the case if you consider the US to be fascist. If the US is inextricably and ultimately tied to fascism in every aspect of it, and if you were to destroy fascism in the US would simultaneously be destroyed, then yeah, the Antifa and Occupy Wall Street are looking for the destruction of the US. But this is part of a sort of rhetorical trick that people like Tim Pool like to do, which is to bundle things together in such a way that they appear inseparable, but in fact, of course, in reality, they're not. This gives the impression that if anyone criticizes some of the negative parts of America, that means that they want to destroy America and the American people as categorized in heavy quotation marks, because that usually just means white middle-class people when people like Tim Pool say it. But I'd like to think that you could stamp out fascism and still have America, you know? It wouldn't be the same as it is now, but that's a good thing.
They all basically think this country is racist, 1619 Project, all that stuff, and one by one our institutions are failing, and it's no surprise. The people in government are incentivized to extract as much as they can as the ship is falling apart. And what's the end result, I guess? We break apart?
That's what should have happened a long time ago. I mean, how do you have people who are like, okay, I literally want to be able to have a baby be born and punch a hole in its head and suck its brain out.
Whoa there! Diving into the madness with both feet. Yeah, nobody wants to do this. Nobody wants to do this, dude. I don't know who you are, but you are f***ing crazy. You know, I spent quite a long time Googling it, trying to, like, find out what the hell they were talking about, because I figured there was some kind of, like, sometimes when they talk about these sorts of things, you can often find, like, an article that they heavily misunderstood, or something just plain made up. At least you could find some kind of source for it that you could debunk. But no, in this case, this appears to be just total made up nonsense. And of course, it's not true. Of course it's not true. Nobody wants to punch a hole in a born baby's skull and suck out its brains. You know, that is clearly madness. And anyone who believes that anyone else wants to do that is totally f***ing nuts. And I'd also just like to point out the irony that Tim Pool spent some time just a second ago arguing about how it's the left who wants the collapse of the United States, which is obvious bunk. But then, like, less than 30 seconds after he'd finished that sentence, his guest, who is clearly on the right, started talking about how it's a good idea to break up the United States. And basically, Tim Pool spends all day, every day, CIA sort of fomenting civil war, essentially.
That was in Virginia.
Yeah, they literally want that to happen. How am I supposed to share air with them? How am I supposed to share a polity with them? I mean, why should I be forced to?
In a weird way, he's sort of kind of right, because this sort of wild misinformation that people on his side believe in, this sort of totally bizarre conspiracy theorizing, it's in fact, I think calling it conspiracy theorizing is a bit kind of disingenuous, because conspiracy theorizing sort of implies that you are kind of taking pieces of information, that like bits of data, and sort of compiling them in such a way to construct a theory that there is a conspiracy occurring behind those bits of data. But that's not what they're doing here. So it's not really a conspiracy theory. It's more like wildly mythologizing, or just the closest thing I can think of is it's like fan fiction, but it's like they're creating fan fiction and then pretending that fan fiction is true and kind of believing it. I think they're believing it. It's hard to tell. In a way, it doesn't matter if they're pretending to believe it or if they do believe it. If they say that they believe it, it basically has the same effect on the discourse and us. But yes, when there are people out there that believe such crazy stuff, such absolutely nut stuff, like that left-wingers want to punch holes in babies' heads and suck out their brains, when they believe that sort of crazy nonsense, stuff like the world being flat, or there's microchips in the vaccine, or ivermectin is some sort of covered-up cure, crazy nonsense. It's crazy nonsense like libertarianism. When they actually believe this stuff, or at least purport to believe this stuff, how can you possibly share a platform with someone like that? They're basically not in reality. And he spouts this like wild nonsense and gets absolutely no pushback from anyone else on the show. They're all like nodding their heads like, yeah, this actually happened in Virginia. Yeah. What the hell are you talking about? Completely insane.
Why don't we just break up? And the hardest part is you have states where, a state like Texas, okay? You have the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Dallas is insanely left. Fort Worth is right. So how do you do that?
I'll tell you exactly how we do it. You're not going to like it, but the solution is stultifyingly obvious. The solution to this impossible disagreement on reality is staring us both in the face. But I'm here to voice it to you. The way we do it is that your side dies out. That's how we do it. Because, in the past, more people believed you outnumbered us, but now we outnumber you. And it's heading in that trajectory. Your children are probably going to be more left-wing than I am. That's the truth. And the way that this is going to be resolved, the most likely way, is democracy. We will democratically outnumber you until you disappear into electoral irrelevancy. And so it won't matter what you believe, because nobody will care. It's not like anyone really cares. Not anyone of any importance really cares now anyway. And that's only going to get worse for you guys. Because in some ways, some of your sort of conspiratorializing is kind of right. We own the universities, we own academia, we own the media, we own comedy, we own the superhero genre, we own your children, we own the music industry, and it's only going to get worse for you. Because the thing is, we own the future, and that's how this is going to be resolved. Anyway, I hope you liked this video and got something out of it. Hippie hyena out. Goodbye.